It is so extremely wildly misogynistic and little fruity. Hello, my name is Taylor, aka Silver Fox, and welcome to my channel. Here on this account, I talk about classic literature, film, pop culture, and just kind of whatever I feel like. At least I hope that's what I'm doing. This is my first video ever.
This is my first video on Instagram.
So I'm not entirely sure how this account's going to go or exactly what I'm going to make. So before I get started on the topic of today's video, I am going to talk a little bit about my plans for this channel and what I want for the future of it and like the kind of videos I'm going to make. So if that doesn't interest you at all and you're just here for the title, I will try to put a timestamp so you can skip straight to the point. Okay, thank you. Also, if I have any issues with lighting or audio or whatever, I am so sorry. This is literally my first video. I just got this little microphone out of the package today and my tripod. This is all new to me. I have some notes here for the whole video that I'm going through. So if you see me like squinting and looking down, it's because I like printed out these really tiny little notes because my hands were hurting and I didn't feel like handwriting it. So if I'm going like, what did I write there? It's because it's really tiny on like receipt paper. Okay, thank you. So some videos I'm wanting to make in the future, I wrote down a whole huge list of ideas. One, bookshelf tour. I have so many like old books and really interesting books because pretty much everything I've ever bought is secondhand. So I have some books that have like really interesting inscriptions in them or just really old and unique copies, and I would just love to go through and show my favorite copies. Like this isn't old or unique or anything, but just it has such a beautiful cover. The Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte from the Chiltern Classics. I love their covers so much. Here I have this from like 1973 edition of The Great Gatsby. I think it's from around 1973 because it has pictures all over it of the adaptation of The Great Gatsby starring Robert Redford. I think it's really neat. I can't read it because I don't speak this language, but it's really nice. Can you see that? I think this is really cool. Maybe no one else cares, but I think it's really interesting. And so I would just love to just go through my bookshelf with you guys and show you all my favorite books. My favorite books and the most unique ones, book recommendations, going through all that, and all the little knickknacks, and just, you know, bookshelf tour. A bookshelf tour. Maybe do videos like my favorite books from this genre, that genre, you know, poetry, literary fiction, general like TBR and review videos. Those are pretty common, so you guys get what that is. And doing maybe some like deep dives into specific authors like Franz Kafka and Jane Austen, who I really love, and I would just love to go through all their books, my favorites, what about them appeals to me, and what about them appeals to people in general. I'm sorry, I am so bad at this. And also just like general literary analysis. I really want this to be a place that encourages critical thinking and learning and reading something new or discovering something new, like a new movie, because I do love movies and I do want to talk about films as well. I would love to do videos of like, here's a really great movie that maybe you've never heard of. Maybe a deep dive into David Lynch and Twin Peaks and all of that, because I love David Lynch. And if you know me, you know I am really serious about David Lynch. I would love to make a video. And I would just love to do deep dives or, you know, beginner's guides into things that I love. Like the Beatles, Talking Heads, Bob Dylan, all that stuff. I love music. And I've had so many people ask me, like, can you do like a whole deep dive to let me know like where to get started on their music? Like what albums should I listen to first, in what order? Some lore, you know. People when they get into artists, they want to know more things about them. So I would just absolutely love to go crazy and spend forever talking about the things that I really enjoy. I would also just love to talk about my personal life experience. You know, as a Christian who grew up in the Deep South, I have a lot of stories, you know, toxic dating and marriage culture within the church, a lot of things that go on. Maybe I could do some reaction videos to more popular, like, Christian influencers who say, like, problematic and toxic things. and hopefully just be a place for other people who have similar shared experiences. You know, as someone who grew up in the South and doesn't necessarily fit the mold of what a Southern person is supposed to be like and doesn't necessarily agree with everything that the people in the South believe and what goes on in the South. Uh, yeah, so I have a lot to say about that, and I could do that. Hello, Editing Taylor here. I do want to take a moment just to clarify and elaborate on what I mean by all of that. As a autistic, homeschooled Christian who grew up in the very, very deep South, went to a wide variety of different churches all throughout my life, some of which ended up being very, very cult-like and toxic, and ended up basically ostracizing and bullying and pushing me and my family out of those churches because they didn't want us there. Um, I have quite a lot of experiences to share. I feel as Christians, it really is our duty to call out toxic, problematic, bigoted, and just wrong behavior that happens in the church. And while I don't intend to just crap on my own religion, I do think it's just important to call those things out and hold people accountable because, maybe there's someone else in a similar situation previously in that situation, or maybe they're in it right now and they could really benefit from knowing someone else has gone through it and that they've come out of it and, just to have that kinship. Or maybe, you don't relate to it at all. This isn't your experience whatsoever, but you would just like to hear someone else's perspective. Maybe, I don't know. That's all I had to say. And overall, I just really want this account to be a safe space, cozy space where you can just click on a video and listen and enjoy. And these videos encourage you to learn and think critically, read more, discover more films and books and things that you enjoy, and maybe make people feel less alone. If I could attribute an aesthetic to what I'm going for, I would say Southern Gothic academia, which I don't think is a thing, but I'm gonna make it one. Sorry, that was a lot, but if there's anything I didn't mention that you think, oh, it would be so cool if she made a video about XYZ, I'm interested in it, please comment below. Uh, I am fully ready for like as much feedback as possible, and if you're also thinking like that's too many different things, you need to like narrow it down, please let me know. Uh, and if these topics interest you, please like and subscribe and stick around. Alright, now on to the actual subject of today's video. If you stuck around through that, thank you so much. I just blabbed my mouth off. Um, and this first subject for my first video, I am very passionate about, and I also think it captures a lot of what I'm going for with my channel, classic literature, films, pop culture, because we got some old Hollywood celebrity drama mixed in here. So here we go with the story of Pygmalion and everything about that. I don't know what this video is going to be called yet, but it's basically the story of Pygmalion, how it got adapted into a bunch of different movies and sort of permeated pop culture and became the basis for a lot of makeover movie, teen drama movies that we see today, and especially were prominent in the 90s. Let's go. And again, if you see me like squinting, looking down, I am reading my notes, which I just printed out on printer paper, and it's really that I just printed out on receipt paper, and so it's really hard to read, and the letters are really tiny, and I'm sorry. So the other day I was watching this video about the history of the makeover movie, and it was really interesting, but about halfway through, the person in the video mentioned, well, you can really blame Audrey Hepburn for all of it, and I immediately paused, because no, 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 no. And before I even say anything, I'm not like blaming this creator or saying that they were just like completely factually incorrect. It was a really interesting video, and I think they were being more snarky. Um, and you can sort of look at it and think, like, oh, My Fair Lady starring Audrey Hepburn was like the first big popular movie that featured a character getting this huge radical makeover, and you can kind of trace it back to that. But I know the history of Pygmalion and My Fair Lady, and I immediately know that that is just not true. It is not the first makeover movie. It is also not even the first makeover movie that Audrey Hepburn was in, because a few years prior to My Fair Lady, in 1957, she was in the movie Funny Face with Fred Astaire. In the movie, she plays a girl who works in a little bookshop in, I don't remember what city, probably New York. And Fred Astaire, a magazine photographer, comes in to do a photo shoot there, and he spots her and immediately recognizes, wow, she would be a really great model. Of course, everyone's like, she's got a funny face. But he recognizes her and he seeks her out and he turns her into a cover model. And then Audrey Hepburn and Fred Astaire fall in love and they sing songs. And, a makeover movie several years prior to My Fair Lady, which was mentioned as the origin for all of this. It is certainly not. And again, I'm not coming from this creator. I just thought, wow, you know what? I think this would be a really great topic to make a video on, so I'm going to make a video on it. Pygmalion was written by Irish playwright George Bernard Shaw, and it premiered in 1913 in German and later was translated into English and premiered in 1914 in English. And it was a really successful play. In London, it did like 118 shows. And George Bernard Shaw was famously like a really difficult director. Like he would work his actors to the bone, and sometimes they would just like storm out during rehearsal because he would make them do it over and over and over, and like nothing was good enough. So it was a really popular play, and the title is based off of a Greek mythological figure of the same name. Pygmalion was a character who you might know from Metamorphoses by Ovid. He sculpts this statue, and it is so perfect that he falls in love with his own, creation, the statue, and later it comes to life. And I'll get more into that later, but that's why he named the play Pygmalion, even though none of the characters in the play are named Pygmalion. So let me give you a quick overview of the play. It's about this linguistics professor named Henry Higgins and this flower shop girl named Eliza Doolittle, who has this very strong Cockney accent that like marks her as like poor or something. I don't really know how Cockney makes you poor, but basically it's not an accent you want to have.
Ew, what's that you say?
And Professor Henry Higgins makes a deal with this guy named Colonel Pickering that he can turn this poor little flower shop girl into a duchess in a very short period of time by like teaching her to speak right and teaching her like how to be a lady. And so they make this deal, and Eliza at first willingly goes with him, and she's like, I want to learn how to be a lady. And so he's teaching her, he's giving her a makeover, he's transforming her. At some point, her father comes by, and because he's like a poor, weird old guy, he basically sells Eliza to Henry Higgins for £5. And so now, at this point, Eliza belongs to Henry Higgins. Lovely. And she really can't leave if she wants to at this point because Henry Higgins is responsible for her, and I believe her character is supposed to be a minor, but I'm not sure. Editing Taylor here. According to the Warner Bros. Fandom wiki, Eliza is believed to be between 18 and 20 years of age, although it's never actually specified. That is just like the assumption of how old she is. So, yeah.
And I like how you're at least 18 years old.
Actually,
I like how you're at least 18 years old.
Either way, she can't really leave. And over this period of time, much like George Bernard Shaw, Henry Higgins is a really rigorous teacher. He puts her through the works. He works her day and night, and she really begins to resent and hate Henry Higgins for this. In the musical, which we'll talk about later, she sings this whole song about like wanting to kill him because she is so done with dealing with his crap. I also forgot to mention that Professor Henry Higgins is much, much older than Eliza Doolittle. He is, in some adaptations, up to 60 years old, and in the film My Fair Lady, he is much older than her, which certainly influences the dynamic of their relationship because this is an older professor seeking out an incredibly young, barely legal woman. And all throughout the play, the difference in their maturity is really shown. He consistently gets on to her for not having the temperament of an older man, for not being as mature as he would like her to be. Even though she's basically a child, she is no more than 20 years old. She is still a teenager, and he is 60. Like, you willingly sought out a teenager. You reap what you sow, man. But honestly, it's because he knows that he can get away with treating a child this way as opposed to a woman closer to his own age, like a lot of men. And at one point in the play, they show Eliza and Higgins getting back from this big ball, and basically she was a perfect lady during this ball, and he won the bet because she seemed like a high society lady and she fit in with everybody. And so now the bet is over, and Higgins has won, and he's like, oh, thank goodness, these past 2 months have really sucked. And this makes Eliza upset. She feels really dismissed because she's put a lot of time and effort into this, and Henry Higgins is just like, well, that's over now. And she fights with him, and the next day her father comes over, and he's inherited like a bunch of money, and so now he's well off, and he's also going to marry, I think, his mistress. And so he comes over to invite Eliza to his wedding, and Henry Higgins' mother, I think Miss Higgins, not his wife, his mother, is like, well, that's who's going to take care of Eliza now because he has money. And this upsets Henry Higgins because he paid a full £5 for her. So obviously he has a right to her. Yeah. But later, Henry and Eliza talk, and she's basically like, I felt very dismissed by you last night. Like, I just feel like you don't really care, and he doesn't apologize for any of it. He says, this is how I act, and he really justifies his behavior. So Eliza says she's leaving, and she's going to her father's wedding, but she's made it clear that she's not coming back afterwards, and that she's going to marry this guy. Going to marry this. What the heck is his name? Eliza tells him she's leaving and she's going to go marry this other guy who has been present throughout the play and has been really interested in her and has been much nicer to her than Professor Henry Higgins. Um, and so she leaves to go to the wedding, and before she leaves, Henry Higgins gives her a list of errands to run while she's out because he still fully believes that she is going to come back in spite of the fact that she has clearly said she's not. So she says, I'm not doing the errands, and she leaves to go to the wedding. And Mr. Higgins, I cannot get it. Professor Higgins' mother is like, I'll do the errands because she's not going to do them. And Higgins is like, nope, she will. And he sits in his chair after she leaves and he laughs to himself about the idea that she would actually leave him and go marry someone else. And the play ends with him sitting in his chair, Eliza gone, thinking to himself, all arrogant, she's coming back. Some fans really didn't like this ending because they wanted like a happy resolution. They wanted something that wasn't quite as open ended. And they really wanted Eliza to end up with Professor Higgins, which is crazy to me because he was really like verbally abusive to her. He was really cruel. He didn't respect her, and he made it clear that he didn't respect her. Even when she said, I'm leaving and I'm not coming back, he didn't believe her because he felt that he owned her and that nothing he did was bad enough for her to actually leave. And so he was just arrogantly like, she's coming back, she's coming back. But fans just didn't like that she didn't actually come back for him. Isn't that crazy? Shaw spent a really long time defending his reasons for not letting Eliza come back because she needed to go off and marry somebody else. She couldn't go back to this guy who mistreated her, who disrespected her. In 1938, the play was adapted into a film also named Pygmalion, and George Bernard Shaw reached out to the producers of the film. Is this too close? George Bernard Shaw reached out to the producers of the film and basically pitched them another ending idea that would sort of compromise and give resolution where it shows Eliza happy in her flower shop, married to another man, and shows like Henry Higgins happy living his own life. So that way fans can still get that like happy ending without Eliza having to end up with Professor Higgins, who sucked. But the producers basically ignored this and ended up creating an ending where Eliza gets together with Higgins anyway. And this ending continued to be the ending that would be used in all of like the Pygmalion and My Fair Lady adaptations for years to come, and would also be the way that a lot of like 90s and early 2000s makeover movies would end. Arguably, the guys in those movies weren't as bad as Professor Henry Higgins. They really watered it down into something that could be a misunderstanding or easily resolved. But ultimately, the women were usually still too good for these guys, and they ended up with him anyway. This ending really takes away from Shaw's original message of the story, which is a woman leaving a man who sucked. The original story of Pygmalion, the Greek mythological figure, he actually decides to create the sculpture because he looks at the women around him and he is really disgusted by them. He thinks they're like whorish and he decides that he's too good for them. And so he creates this sculpture, this perfect ideal woman, and he falls in love with her because she's not a real woman and he's created her. And that's mirrored in in the play Pygmalion when Henry Higgins tries to sculpt Eliza into his idea of a woman. And so when you give them a happy ending together, you're really kind of ruining what Shaw was saying about how she needed to leave. She could not be his ideal woman, and she didn't need to be. She needed to be her own person. She didn't need to be sculpted into his creation. She was very unhappy with the way that Higgins created her. She did not like being a lady. I mean, she liked some of it. She liked having a different accent she could throw on. She liked having the option to fraternize with members of high society, but that wasn't really the life she wanted, which is also shown in the fact that the alternate ending Shaw gave for the story was Eliza in her flower shop, still working in the flower shop, even though she had opportunities and money now and married a rich man. She still wanted to be like a regular flower shop girl. She did not conform to Higgins' idea of a woman, even after he showed her exactly how to. And when you put them together at the end of the play anyway, you're basically saying nothing Higgins did was actually bad enough for her to leave, and that it was better for her to end up with him than to be her own happy person. In 1956, Pygmalion was adapted into a Broadway musical called My Fair Lady, which is what I've been mentioning throughout this video. Um, as far as I know, it was basically exactly the same as the play, but with a happy ending and just musical numbers added all throughout. It was created by, I'm so going to get their names wrong, I'm sorry. It was created by Alan J. Lerner and Frederick Lowe. I don't actually know how to say that, even though I see it everywhere. It's like a big old brand name. I don't know how to pronounce it. I always just pronounce it Lowe's, like the hardware store. But My Fair Lady was a huge success. It had a record run on Broadway and won 6 Tony Awards, and the leading actress who led them to all of this success was none other than Dame Julie Andrews. So when it was adapted into a film in 1964, everyone, including Julie Andrews herself, kind of assumed that she would be cast to play the lead. But according to reports during that time, they asked Julie Andrews to do a screen test, and her response was basically like, what do you mean? You've quite literally seen me play this character on stage. You know that I can do it. You've seen me do it. And so she didn't do a screen test, and that really rubbed them the wrong way. And so the studio passed her over for the role and instead gave it to Audrey Hepburn. And while Julie Andrews was originally the face of My Fair Lady, Audrey Hepburn would soon become the face because she starred in the movie adaptation. A lot of people don't even know that Julie Andrews was originally Eliza Doolittle.
Oh, we are proud. Did you tell him I come in a taxi?
Even Audrey Hepburn herself was reluctant to take the role because she thought Julie Andrews had done such a good job and deserved to have the role in the film. But once she learned that the studio wasn't planning on casting Julie Andrews at all and was just going to cast a random actress no matter what, Audrey Hepburn decided to take the role because she felt she deserved it just as much as anyone else who isn't Julie Andrews. The filming of My Fair Lady, much like the original play and Henry Higgins' teachings, was very difficult and rigorous. Audrey Hepburn worked for 12 hours a day, and even though that's a pretty normal time for the average person to work, she was singing like the majority of that time. And she couldn't really sing according to the people working on the film. She was very bad at it and she worked very hard like day and night to try and get better at singing. But ultimately her songs were dubbed in the film and that upset Audrey a bit because she really wanted to be good enough to sing and she was worried that people would be mad at her for not being a good singer after the Julie Andrews didn't get to sing. Also, during that time, Julie Andrews told reporters that if she had been asked to do the dubbed singing for the movie, she would have spat in the eye of the person who asked, which is really what originated the idea that there was beef between Audrey and Julie because Audrey took the role from her. But despite the supposed beef and Audrey Hepburn singing, the film went on to be a huge success, winning 8 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. But Audrey Hepburn famously lost out the Best Leading Actress Oscar to none other than Julie Andrews. Yes, that same Julie Andrews. Because she wasn't cast in My Fair Lady, she instead went on to do Mary Poppins, which she won her Best Leading Actress Oscar for. So that was kind of a beautiful moment for her. Winning the Oscar against the woman they had cast to replace her was pretty crazy. And considering there were photos after the show of her holding on tight to her Oscar standing next to Audrey Hepburn, that continued to create this idea that there was beef and that Julie really didn't like Audrey because she had taken the role from her. But reportedly, after the award show, like backstage, Audrey told Julie, it should have been you, like you should have been cast. You were perfect for it, and I'm sorry that you didn't get it. Um, and Julie Andrews and Audrey Hepburn were apparently friends and stayed friends long after that. Like any beef they may have had was settled when Audrey said, it should have been you. So, although old Hollywood fans continue to believe that they really didn't like each other and that they were fighting, and although I definitely think Julie Andrews felt snubbed, as she should have, it was definitely her role to have. She's a good person. Like, she didn't stay mad about that forever, especially when she won an Oscar for the role she took instead. So, Pygmalion was a Greek mythological figure that became a play, that became a movie, that became another play, but musical this time, that became a movie, but musical this time. And all of this combined sort of became the basis for a lot of future movies based on makeovers and the idea of like this guy taking a bet to create this woman who is better than the old version of her. Probably the prime example of this is She's All That, in which the male lead bets that he can turn any woman in his school into prom queen and over the next couple of weeks just because he's so popular and he knows what it takes to be a popular girl who becomes prom queen. He picks Lainey Boggs, who ultimately falls in love with him at the end of the movie, even after she finds out he was just doing it for a bet and she felt betrayed. And yes, this sounds like every other movie on earth, doesn't it? Another prominent movie in this category is Pretty Woman, in which a really rich man picks a sex worker up off the street and asks her to be his girlfriend for a week, paying her a bunch of money, and he gives her a makeover. He wants her to dress nice and not like she's a sex worker. Uh, and over the course of the movie, she falls in love with him, even though he consistently disrespects her. Uh, they still get together in the end, and it's happy, lovey-dovey. And to my knowledge, both Pretty Woman and She's All That were directly based off of the play Pygmalion. I could be wrong. You can fact check that if you want to. I'm going to fact check myself on this one. Out of the two, only She's All That is directly inspired by Pygmalion. But if you go to IMDb and you search up Pygmalion, the first movie that shows up is not She's All That or any of the actual direct Pygmalion adaptations, but Pretty Woman is the first one to show up because there are so many similarities in the structure of the story. So even though it isn't directly based off of it, it's still very heavily inspired by it. But a lot of others were loosely based off this idea or were just inspired by other works that were inspired by Pygmalion. A lot of films probably did see the success of My Fair Lady and thought I could totally recreate that. I just give the lead a really crappy guy to fall in love with, and then they get together anyway, even though he shows that he's crappy. Overall, the public's response to the ending of the play, all the way back in 1914, really foreshadowed all the things to come. How people viewed relationships with men and women, what women should be willing to put up with, and how people just want a happy ending. And a happy ending is getting married at whatever the cost for a lot of people. I won't go over every single makeover theme rom-com to ever exist because there's tons of them and I'm sure you've seen them and I'm sure you've loved and hated them and rewatched them just because they're so cringy. I myself have seen She's All That like 3 times because even though I hate it, I love it. But Pygmalion's influence on pop culture truly cannot be understated. It really paved the way for so many duplicates, and also continued to influence pop culture in many other ways. In the movie Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen, that big play everyone is trying out for and trying to get the role for and fighting about, is a modern rock and roll adaptation of Pygmalion called Eliza Rocks. And it really did rock. I don't understand why the students were so judgy when the drama teacher announced that she would be doing this. Because, I'm sorry, but if you were auditioning for a play and you got told you were going to be doing a modern rock and roll musical, wouldn't you go like, heck yeah? I thought we were going to be doing Shakespeare up in here, which I love Shakespeare, and I'm sure there's a lot of people who would love to do a classic Shakespeare play. I am one of them. But if you're a high school student who just wants to be on stage, wouldn't knowing you get to speak in modern English make it a little less intimidating? Like, I don't understand why those teenagers were so mean to that teacher. This is kind of unrelated to the overall point, but I will take any excuse to bring up Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen. I loved that movie when I was a kid, and if I watched it now, it probably wouldn't stand the test of time, but I don't care. I loved it when I was a kid. And also, if you ever have watched Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen, I hope you noticed that they were doing an adaptation of Pygmalion, because I noticed, and that's where I learned what Pygmalion was and became interested in it. In conclusion, Henry Higgins was a misogynistic character that the general public thought Eliza Doolittle should end up with, even at the expense of her own happiness. And even today, we still see in pop culture and in reality where people truly believe that this should be the case. They really believe the ultimate goal is for a woman to get married to a man at the end of the movie, no matter who that man is. And this is so present in really every rom com where the man does the woman horribly wrong, and she goes, "Oh, uh, well, I forgive you. We can still be together. I put a lot of time into this, and there's only 10 minutes left of the movie, so I can't find anybody else. Let's get together." And this is particularly exemplified in Colleen Hoover novels. The male protagonist will often do something absolutely horrific and unforgivable to the lead. In the novel November 9th, the male lead burns this woman and nearly kills her, leaves her scarred for life physically, like fourth degree burns all down her body. And he lies about it. He lies that he's the one who started the fire and nearly killed her. And when she finds about it at the end of the story, she forgives him and basically says that she's actually the one who needs to apologize. And they get together, and they're such a lovey dovey, cute couple, even though he has done absolutely nothing throughout the story to redeem his behavior for setting her on fire. Now, Henry Higgins never set Eliza Doolittle on fire, but he consistently disrespected and demeaned her, which is why, literally, in the musical, there's a whole song, as I said earlier, where she sings about how much she hates him and wants to kill him and wants to leave because she is so sick of the way he's treating her, the way he never gives her any breaks or reprieves. He's never like, "Oh, well, you did a good job today. Just it's fine." He's like, "No, you have to do a good job every single day without fail, or I will be terrible to you." And Henry Higgins is the prime example of a misogynistic man who, for some reason, is obsessed with women. In the musical, there is a song where I believe this is both in the play, the musical play, and in the movie. Um, I've seen the movie, I haven't seen the play, obviously. Um, he goes on this really long musical rant about how women are not as good as men.
Yes, why can't a woman be more like a man?
And that a woman's company will never be as good as a man. And it is so extremely, wildly misogynistic and fruity, because he's singing the song to another man, talking about how he would rather be around guys all day and talk to guys, and women just don't live up to other guys. Okay? If that's how you feel.
Why can't a woman be like you?
But even though the play was written over 100 years ago and the musical was written over 70 years ago, we still today see so much similarities between the way men treat women and what's expected of women to put up with as we did 100 years ago. Isn't that crazy? The play was very much a product of its time, but it could be written today and still received similarly, with people thinking, "Oh, Eliza should have ended up with Professor Higgins." And that could be partially attributed to the fact that people really just hate anything that doesn't have like a perfect closed ending. They hate the idea that characters still could continue to live their own lives after the movie ends. I don't know why people are like this. Some of the best movies have ambiguous or open-ended endings. Um, but I think really it boils down to the idea that women should put up with men being horrible. This guy likes you. Sure, he sucks. He's mean to you, but he likes you, and you kind of like him, so why not just push everything else aside and get married? I do think it's a shame to look at the reception of a 110-year-old play and realize people still mostly feel the same way today. It's very disheartening. Um, I don't exactly have like a very specific conclusion. I just wanted to give you the history of Pygmalion and My Fair Lady and how it really has influenced so many other movies and stories. Because, I mean, literally, I'm sure while I was reading that out to you, you thought, wow, that sounds familiar. That formula sounds really familiar. because so many movies and even romance novels continue to follow this formula even today, even in the year of our Lord 2025. The makeover story, the idea of a man betting against a woman or betting on a woman or disrespecting her in some way in secret and then it being found out and she forgives him even though, excuse me, what? And then they get together at the end of the story regardless. Um, you see that so much in so many romance stories that Pygmalion's influence really cannot be overstated. And it definitely isn't the only makeover or romance story that people take inspiration from, but I think it's a notable one. I don't really have a good ending. Editing Taylor here, I definitely have more to say. I was very nervous originally recording this, so I'm sorry that so many of my comments are done via the editing voiceover, but I have stuff to say. In the film Pretty Woman, Richard Gere is extremely disrespectful to Julia Roberts. To him, she is the statue Galatea that he sculpts and falls in love with. Even in the film, she acknowledges that he has disrespected her. He has treated her like property, and it makes her feel dirty. He makes her feel like something he just bought, not a person he is sharing an intimate relationship with. And yet, this is all forgiven when he too realizes he has developed feelings over the course of a week. That totally excuses how he views her. Simply realizing he has romantic interest in her will not change the way he fundamentally does not view her as an equal. Henry Higgins does not view Eliza Doolittle as an equal. He doesn't even believe she has her own autonomy. When she looks him in the eye and tells him she's leaving and not coming back, he does not believe her because he genuinely thinks she's going to continue to do whatever it is he wants her to do because he thinks that's what she should do. That's what she's for. He didn't understand that she meant it when she said she was leaving, because he had spent the past 2 months doing his darndest to sculpt her into a woman who would bend and sway to his every whim, and he couldn't fathom that she would not conform to that. The alternate endings are not happy endings. Eliza Doolittle is being doomed to a life of being criticized and belittled under the guise of matrimony. And that is the fatal flaw with a lot of these romantic comedies. They turn Henry Higgins, who was a warning sign, into a love interest. The play Pygmalion by George Bernard Shaw was truly ahead of its time. It was really a feminist piece written over 110 years ago by a man, and it was widely received well, minus all the people who said, well, she should have ended up with him anyway. It had a good message. It showed all the ways in which Henry Higgins disrespected and manipulated Eliza and showed her leaving anyway. All the ways in which he justified his behavior weren't enough for her to stay. She had more self-respect. And all of these modern rom-coms would be better off if they let the female protagonist realize that she's better off without him. The fact that he's sorry in the end doesn't really change the fact that he made a bet against her. He was constantly manipulating her. And she saw that. Do you think Freddie Prinze Jr. would have apologized for his behavior if the guy from Fast and Furious didn't say, oh, this was a bet, if he didn't out him for that? He had no intentions of ever telling Lainey Boggs what was really going on. He would have taken her to prom, they would have fallen in love, and maybe 20 years down the line he would have said, hey, you know how we got together in high school? Well, that's a funny story. A Greek myth dating back thousands of years has evolved over time through various interpretations and adaptations and sequels. And although every story nowadays is not Pygmalion, despite Colleen Hoover's best efforts, there are many romance stories today in which the female lead ends up with a good man who actually deserves her, or else she leaves the man who does not deserve her, or perhaps she even ends up with no man. In the year 2004, the film The Princess Diaries: The Royal Engagement premiered. In that film, Mia Thermopolis boldly declares she will rule her country without a king by her side. Both her and her grandmother proudly rule Genovia without a king, without a husband. And while the magical fairy tale land of 2004 can seem like a lifetime ago, and things seem so much different now, we have to continue hope against hope to believe that things will get better for women in both film and in reality. And the only way for us to do that is to not give up. To continue fighting for what we believe in, and hope that one day society as a whole can recognize that marriage is not the end-all be-all for a woman. I'm sorry for blabbing on incoherently. I know I kind of go on rants and tangents and I mumble and I don't even know what I'm saying. And I'm not sure if I said all of this even in the order that I wanted to, but I hope I got my point across. And maybe one day in the future, when I have more confidence in front of a camera, I will revisit this topic in more depth and more detail, and I will give you the full beginning to end history of Pygmalion and My Fair Lady, and She's All That, and Pretty Woman, and you get it. Thank you so much for watching. If you have stuck around for this long, thank you so much. I'm really sorry if the audio sucks or if I mumbled or if I talk too fast. I have a tendency to just blah 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 and not stop, and even my friends and family tend to say slow down, I can't understand what you're saying. So I'm really sorry if I babbled on and my words got away from me. But thank you so much for watching this. I am so excited for the future of this channel. So if this interested you, please like and subscribe and comment below what topics you would like me to discuss in the future. Bye! I don't want to do this. I'm nervous. Oh. I just broke my ring light. I have some notes here. And who was the lead actress that led all of this to... I also love Audrey Hepburn, so yeah, I take that personally, even it's not that serious, but lead character who was like broke and had a, you know, a crazy accent, and they were like, we're gonna fix her.